For the first time ever, details coming to light about a secret FBI working group that allegedly investigates unidentified aerial phenomena, or also known as UAPs, UFOs. It's the first time that the group has ever been publicly disclosed, according to Politico. That claim coming from former Navy pilot Ryan Graves. If you remember, he was the first active duty pilot to come forward about regular sightings of UAPs. We heard his whistleblower testimony in front of Congress last year. Graves says the FBI working group is made up of more than a dozen staff who, quote, spend much of their time tracking down UAPs. I now want to bring in Ryan Graves. He's co-founder of Americans for Safe Aerospace. Ryan, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I mean, this is the first time the public is learning of this secret group, this probe into UFOs. You've spoken to these agents. Who are they and what exactly are they working on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So these agents have taken upon this responsibility as a part of a bottoms-up approach in order to understand what potential illegalities might be occurring with objects that are operating within our airspace that we're not properly tracking or mitigating. The FBI has both a law enforcement as well as a counterintelligence responsibility. So having objects that are harassing military bases as well as the general public over our national airspace squarely fits within their domain of responsibilities.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of Americans are listening to this segment right now, seeing this headline saying, what, FBI agents, looking into UFOs? How long have they been a group, Ryan, and tasked with investigating them?
Well, my understanding is that they kicked off this work in about 2020. We've been engaging with them for the past year and a half. And what that primarily looks like, we receive a lot of reports at Americans for Safe Aerospace, some that might have serious national security implications. And so with the permission of the pilots or the witnesses, we've referred the pilot to interview with these groups such that these agents can then follow up on the reports, gather additional information, talk to additional witnesses, and look for gaps in our national security that they can address for the nation.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if they found anything so far? I mean, have they told you anything, any specifics?
Well, of course, they're limited to what they can share with me about these ongoing investigations. I'm not read in or part of the group in an official capacity necessarily. We're essentially trying to do the right thing by ensuring these gaps don't go unmitigated. But from what I understand is that their investigations have been very fruitful, and they've been able to move the ball both in an unclassified and classified regime forward quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. And I understand several of them have told you that they're worried about losing their job in a Trump-targeted purge, since a lot of them worked on January 6th cases. You know, agents across the board have to fill out this questionnaire about their work on the Capitol attack. What are they sharing with you on that end, and what would your message to the White House be in regards to that?
Yeah, there are expected to be a number of purges within the FBI, and although this isn't a classified effort, it is a quiet effort within the Bureau. And the fear was that these agents would get wrapped up into this larger removal of agents within the FBI and leave the UAP investigation essentially hung and dry where it is. So my message would be to the administration is to recognize the fantastic work that these agents are doing for our national security, and to ideally, directly to Director Patel, to formalize this effort within the agency and resource them so they can continue and expand their efforts.
You know, I mentioned right off the top, a lot of us heard your congressional testimony last year. You've given us a lot of time here at NewsNation, which we're so appreciative of. You've sounded the alarm here on this network in the past, calling for more protections for whistleblowers who have come forward to testify before Congress about these UFOs. Ryan, where do your concerns stand now as far as whistleblowers being willing and able to speak out?
Well, there absolutely is still concern from whistleblowers and even just witnesses. I'll separate those two a little bit, because whistleblowers may have classified information they wish to share, where witnesses may have critical information to a national security concern that is of interest to the FBI. I'm not aware of if or how specific any investigation into classified efforts go within the FBI working group, but the work that has been done with the witnesses has been incredibly fruitful. And I think a lot of our witnesses are very appreciative that there is a serious agency that's looking into their concerns.
Well, we thank you and others for everything you've shared and done, and appreciate you kind of taking us a little bit more behind the scenes of this story that's coming to light. Ryan Graves, always good to have you, sir. Thanks.
Thank you.
Joe, what did you learn about this task force and what they're actually going to be examining?
Well, it's definitely a novel idea. And look, Elizabeth, this is going to be taking on quite a bit of material here. The task force on the declassification of government secrets. As we heard the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, and Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna describe, they say it's basically going to be a force for transparency within the government on things that have been private for decades. Now, they say, should be released to the public. They say that President Trump was elected with a mandate for transparency and promises to do something like this. So they're trying to tackle a whole bunch of things all in one task force. So get ready. This is the assassinations of JFK, RFK, MLK, UAPs, and USOs, so underwater submersible objects, the origins of COVID, the Epstein client list, and 9/11, anything that the CIA has not released relating to 9/11. So this is quite a list here, quite an agenda for one task force. Now, important to note, they do not have subpoena power. That's important because they cannot command by law that any agency, whether it be the FBI, CIA, or otherwise, hand over documents. But the Oversight Committee does have that power, and Chairman Comer, standing right next to Luna there, said that if this task force needs it, he would be willing to have the committee issue subpoenas whenever necessary. Take a listen to what else they said here this morning.
The biggest information problems that we've had with UAPs is the amount of stonewalling, stovepiping, and also it seems that there is this push to gaslight the American people into looking at the evidence and then not fully believing it. Why is it that members of Congress who are given a top secret security clearance are being denied access?
So, Elizabeth, you can imagine a lot of attention on this task force. They say it's going to be very bipartisan, too.
Yeah, and they have got about 2 decades worth of work to do if they're going to get to that long list. Joe Khalil.
So, Ross, the major question, do you think the Pentagon confirming it's investigating the allegations of Jake Barber is a major step forward here?
It's an incremental step forward. I think it's important because we do know that the new director of AARO, the Pentagon's UAP investigation office, a chap called Dr. John Kozlowski, were assured he's very serious about investigating the phenomenon. And he admitted to the Congress under oath late last year that he was indeed now talking to first-hand whistleblowers. So to get this confirmation now from the Pentagon that they are now indeed investigating is positive. But as Dr. John Kozlowski has said to several people, his powers are very limited. The Pentagon dictates what he's allowed to reveal and what he's allowed to say publicly. And there isn't a very proud history, I'm afraid, of the Pentagon wanting to be very forthcoming about what we do believe is a covert UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program. So really, I think a lot depends on the degree of transparency and openness that's permitted by the Pentagon, and a lot of that hangs on the new administration. It really does rest with the president and also to some degree with the Congress whether or not we're going to get any movement on any further disclosure about this alleged covert program.
It's very interesting. I know you say there is very clear intent from senior echelons within the Pentagon leadership to continue to suppress this story. Tell me more about that.
Look, there's been for decades, I believe, a covert program where the United States, I do believe, has hid its recovery, its retrieval of non-human technology. I know a lot of people will roll their eyes and scoff at such a notion, but the evidence is now getting pretty overwhelming that this is real. There have been noises from very senior people in this new administration, including the new DNI, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, and also the head of the FBI, Nash Patel. These people have all indicated their willingness to investigate the UAP issue. What's interesting, though, is that the Pentagon recently came back with an answer to the White House on the drone incursions that you and I have spent a lot of time talking about. And they tried to explain them away as FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, authorized drones, that this was somehow some kind of authorized drone program. That's completely in contradiction to what the FAA said under oath to the Congress in December. So we're getting mixed messages from this new administration. And I'm not confident that we're going to see any degree of transparency. A lot rests, for example, on whether Anna Paulina Luna, the congresswoman who's launched this new transparency committee, is going to be allowed to ask the tough questions in a public hearing, and whether the new president, President Trump, is indeed serious with his promise to get to the bottom of the UAP mystery. So far, I'm a little bit skeptical, but we'll wait and see.
Okay, yeah, wait and see for sure. I want to return to some of your thoughts on some of the government operations that Barber was a part of. Here he is speaking about his work on what he calls the range. Let's listen.
A lot of the work we did was on what I call the range, where the U.S. government and its private partners use to test all kinds of things, weapon systems and resilience to weapon systems of certain craft. And so you see a lot of exciting things.
Ross, in your experience rigorously covering so many UAP-related stories now, how does Barber's account compare to other whistleblower testimonies?
It totally correlates. I mean, Natasha, the reason I'm so sure about Barber telling the truth is because I was referred to Mr. Barber by people inside the legacy program, scientists who are frustrated that they think the public should have a right to know this information, that they say there's no good reason for the continued secrecy. And one of the problems with the military and the intelligence community is often they maintain secrecy for, frankly, no good reason. I do think that we're on the edge of a possible disclosure if this new government decides to be candid. And I think there's really no good reason why the continued secrecy should continue in the way it has. The government does have the opportunity to finally, once and for all, admit that we are not alone, that there is indeed an advanced intelligence of a non-human nature engaging with this planet. But whether the Pentagon wants to admit that or not, there is a certain inevitability, because Jake Barber and his team at Skywatcher are now trying to replicate what they did on the range privately with the backing of private equity.
For more on all of this, we're bringing in NewsNation special correspondent Ross Coulthart. Ross, it is always so good to see you. Let's start with what Representative Burchett says that an admiral told him, an extremely fast-moving underwater UFO. What do you make of this? How does this line up with accounts that you have heard? And do you think we'll see more people in high-level positions coming out with these accounts of UFOs?
G'day, Natasha. Lovely to speak to you again. Look, I've heard this story before. I've heard multiple accounts of objects moving at ridiculous speeds underwater. I've actually spoken to submariners in both the American military and also the Australian military who've told me that they've recorded objects moving at over 1,000 kilometres an hour underwater. That's faster than the speed of sound in the air. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. There are weird, anomalous objects now being acknowledged by the United States government, and we have this weird disconnect where, yes, they admit that these objects are real, whatever they are, but they refuse to reveal the secrets that they have, which we know they have behind all of this. And obviously last week we went very public with a major story where we revealed a whistleblower who actually flatly alleged that the US government is fully aware of these UAPs, these unidentified anomalous phenomena, that they are some form of non-human craft. Hell of a claim, but he went public and he was backed by multiple colleagues, and the silence from the Pentagon on this in the last few days has been deafening. They've not said a thing. They haven't denied it. All they've done is completely try and ignore it.
Yeah, we have Representative Burchett coming on the show tomorrow. Do you have a question for him in particular and others like him?
I think the big thing for Tim is, does he think that there's the political will inside the Congress? I'm getting feel-outs at the moment from very senior people in the Trump administration, especially in the wake of my interview with Don Trump Jr. before I did the primetime special. People are contacting me very discreetly from the very highest levels of defence, new intelligence community appointees, and they're asking the question, can we speak to Jake Barber? Is it possible possible for us to get a briefing from this guy? Can we see the evidence? I think there's been a timidity, there's been a stigma, frankly, attached to this subject for decades, and the intelligence community that wants to suppress this story has used that stigma to try and stop politicians from engaging with it. So the big question for Tim is, does he think he can get the numbers, not just with the UAP caucus that he has in the House, but more importantly with the opinion makers, with Marco Rubio, who's previously spoken out about the issue before he became, of course, the Secretary of State in this new administration. He's indicated that he's aware of first-hand whistleblowers, and now, of course, one of those first-hand whistleblowers has come forward. I'm aware, because I'm talking to some of them, there are senior people in defence and intelligence who want you all to know the truth about this story. But there's a logjam in the Congress. What's needed is for the Congress to indicate that there's a political will. And that's where Tim and his colleagues come in. They've done a great job in the House. But are the people who are the key influencers, the key opinion leaders on the key committees, are they going to let these questions be asked in either private or public forum?
The Pentagon says it has officially cracked one of its most high-profile UFO investigations, revealing in a hearing on Capitol Hill it was nothing more than a trick of the eye.
Roger. There's troubleshooting.
So that video, known as the Go Fast video, was released to the public in 2017, showing what appears to be an object flying at an incredibly high speed. The object was recorded off the East Coast in 2015 by a fighter jet from the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Earlier this week, the director of the Defense Department's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office testified on the case, saying the object was not out of the ordinary, but rather caused by an illusion.
Looks like an object flying very fast over the water, very close to the water. We assess with high confidence that the object is not actually close to the water, but is rather closer to 13,000 feet. A trick of the eye called parallax makes it look like the object is moving much faster.
All right, so let's bring in Nick Pope, who formerly worked for the British Ministry of Defense investigating UFO phenomenon. Nick, thank you so much for your time on this. So I want to talk about this hearing earlier this week. This was the first time we heard publicly from the new director of AARO, John Kozlowski. And I also want to play part of what he said in his nearly 40 minutes of testimony. All right, it sounds like we don't have that sound. We'll try to get that. But Nick, what is your understanding of the activities of this All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office? And also, what do you make of the fact that there was this closed-door session prior to the hearing?
Well, I think the closed-door session is very interesting because it shows that whatever people say in public, part of this subject is still highly classified. And of course, we can speculate what that might mean. Skeptics say it probably just means that they're talking about secret prototype aircraft and drones. Believers say it might have something to do with extraterrestrials. But I think I regard this hearing this week as being good news. AARO is doing their job. And if they manage to successfully explain some of these cases, particularly high-profile ones like this, that's good news, because then they can move on to the ones that even by their own admission, they can't explain. And I think one of the most important pieces of testimony that AARO's director gave this week to the Senate was the fact that they do have on their books some very interesting and anomalous cases that even the combined resources and capabilities of the intelligence community cannot currently solve.
So, Nick, in a newly released report, the Pentagon office says it has, quote, no indication or confirmation that UFO reports are, quote, attributable to foreign adversaries. What are your thoughts? What is your interpretation of that, Nick?
Well, that's interesting because, again, as I mentioned, one of the popular theories about these objects is that some of them are secret prototype aircraft, missiles, and drones, perhaps being operated by adversaries like China or Russia. in an intelligence gathering role against strategic U.S. military assets. That theory seems to have been taken off the table, which is interesting because it does then narrow the focus and mean that we can really concentrate on trying to solve the cases and say, look, could some of this really be extraterrestrial, as the believers say, or is it all optical illusions like parallax effect that was mentioned this week, or sensor errors, perhaps? And this is why AARO is going to ramp up its efforts to work, for example, with the scientific and academic community, something which is long overdue, by the way.
So, Nick, what do you think is the answer here? Do you think there is real proof of something, whatever that something may be?
We don't yet have a smoking gun to say any of this is extraterrestrial, but yeah, by their own admission, AARO are getting more and more cases. Next year, one of the big revelations this week is that they're going to open up reporting to the public. And we know every week I receive photographs and videos of these things. And you know, it only takes one of these cases to be the real thing, to be, for example, something genuinely extraterrestrial. And it will change our world forever. But yeah, 99% of these things have conventional explanations. Let's eliminate those and see what we're left with.